Hey yo, it's Retro. Welcome to another video. Y'all, grab a seat. We're gonna be talking for a little bit, I think. Today we're gonna talk about Batman recommendations. If you ever wanted to read Batman, didn't know where to start, honestly, I get it. There are a lot of comics. Honestly, there are a lot of great Batman comics. My first introduction obviously was through animation, Batman the animated series, The Batman 2003, also the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, his appearance in Static Shock, all that good stuff. I am obviously a huge fan of the character. The Batman 2022 is my favorite comic book movie ever, and The Penguin was a great show. I just finished it recently. And if you've been wondering, where should I start? How do I start? I'm gonna segment this into a couple categories. We have early years, beginner-friendly stories, self-contained stories, not the best stories, but still very popular. Then you have modern. When I say modern, I say 90s to now. Then you got some self-contained stories, wholly self-contained stories that I think are, I wouldn't say are necessary, but I do think if you're going to read Batman, if you're going to read a lot of Batman comics, definitely have to be in your reading list. And then I'm going to talk about some other options, some other books that you don't really have to read, some monumental runs that, like, you know, the outcome of these runs through cultural osmosis, but you can still read them here. And then also talk about some of my favorite writers as well, my favorite artists, just all around, like a general Batman recommendation video and what I think are the best comics to start with, what I think are the best comics to read. This is not gospel. This is my opinion. If you don't like my opinion, I don't care, okay? Cool. Let's get into it. Batman has a couple earlier comics, but if you're going to read one, Batman Year One by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. I just reread this story, and I don't want to say it's the best Batman story ever, but it is one of the best Batman comics you can ever read. It's a very high bar to start with, honestly, but you get a lot of what makes Batman Batman. It is a genuine first year, and one of my favorite parts about it is the fact that it's primarily told by Jim Gordon. It's really, Batman Year One is kind of just, it's Jim Gordon's first year in Gotham and experiencing this Batman myth. Now at this point, Batman is around 25, and he had just come back from touring the world, and he's ready to set up in Gotham and become a superhero. And you see him struggle. You see him, you see where he becomes the Batman. You see where he becomes the Knight. You see where he becomes a Caped Crusader. But again, it's primarily told through Jim Gordon, and it's this interesting juxtaposition from this character who had grown up in Gotham, who had been damned by Gotham, trying to fix Gotham, and this character who isn't from Gotham, trying to fix Gotham and do it the right way, especially when the Gotham PD is extremely corrupt. There's no real villain in this story. It's the Gotham Police Department. Excellent series. You have to read this. If you're going to read a single Batman comic, Batman Year One by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli is the Batman series you need to read. After that, you have Batman Long Halloween and Batman Dark Victory, both by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. They are, if you want to create a Batman timeline, these two stories definitely come right after. There is also a Batman Year Two and a Batman Year Three. Not necessary. They do kind of tell similar stories, and it's kind of Batman's journey in his second year, and also eventually when he gets Robin. The Long Halloween is one of the stories that the Batman 2022 is highly inspired by. When that was coming out, this is one of the first comics people were saying, oh, you need to read. It's not completely the same. It's not the same villain. It doesn't take over the same amount of time. It takes place over a year, but it's a very great example of how excellent artistry can match simple storytelling and make for a landmark story. Batman Long Halloween and Batman Dark Victory, both great stories. And then we have some beginner-friendly runs, and by beginner-friendly, I mean you could read this, get the gist of who Batman is, get the gist of the universe of DC a bit, or the Bat family, depending on which one you read. There's Batman Hush, and then there's Batman Universe. Batman Hush is honestly like some people's first Batman comic. You get a lot of the Batman family in this story. Is it the best Batman comic? No, it's okay. It's not great. Jim Lee's art is very good. If you love Jim Lee, you're going to love his art in this, but it is okay. It is an okay comic. I'm not going to say it's bad. However, on the flip side, Batman Universe, that is an amazing comic written by Brian Michael Bendis and drawn by Nick Darrington. It's globetrotting Batman at his best. It's kind of like a who's who DC book, which is like an encyclopedia, sort of. It's a DC encyclopedia that kind of just tells you like who's who, and it's through the lens of Batman and his relationship with these people. Excellent comic, very fun book. If you want something that you can just read really quick, both of these are really good options. Not full runs, they're about 6 issues and really good books. Very, very well renowned. Both of these are very popular. Hush more so because it's a lot older, but it's still modern enough. Now we're gonna go into modern runs. When I say modern, I mean from the 90s till about now. All of these runs, I feel like if you have a general knowledge about Batman, you can read these. Honestly, you can read these even without reading his origin, because you kind of get it. You get it. Batman's origin is everywhere. Everybody knows how he became Batman, but still, like I said earlier, Batman Year One, if you're going to read an origin, that's the one. When it comes to modern runs, you have a few, and they're very lengthy. They're very lengthy runs. They're a little bit of investment needs to be given, and I will link below purchase links if you want to buy any of these comics. I will link them below if I can find them. To start, we have the Nightfall Saga, Batman Nightfall Saga, which starts with Night Quest, which starts with Batman Nightfall, Night Quest, and then Night's End, I believe is the order. There are omnibuses, there are collections that collect this whole story, so you don't have to worry about finding all of these comics individually. But this is when Bane breaks Batman's back. One of the most popular events that happens to Batman. It is a saga. When I say Nightfall Saga, I genuinely mean it. It is very long. There are a lot of comics that go into it, a lot of writers during this time. Is it amazing? I think it's a very fun comic, and it was a little biased because Dick Grayson becomes Batman during this, but you know what, like, who cares? Who cares? I love Batman and I love Nightwing, and him being Batman is great, and it was a great time. It's a great comic. Genuinely, if you're going to read Batman, I think this is one of those runs that you should read. And then that kind of leads into the next one, which is Road to No Man's Land and No Man's Land. This is, when I say Nightfall is a saga, this is even more of a saga. This gives you the greatest scope of what the modern Batman family looks like. You have Cassandra Cain, you have Huntress during this time, you have Dick Grayson as Nightwing during this time, Tim Drake is here, Batman is operating. This is where the Batman family kind of really gets solidified. We get one or two more later down the line, especially with Jason Todd coming back, and I think Stephanie Brown comes back later, and then that's when the Batman family is solidified. And then you get Damian Wayne as well. Batman family's huge, but that's when it's really gets solidified. But right here is when it's like the modern sense of what the Batman family looks like, especially when Dick Grayson is an adult, Batman around 45 years old, Tim Drake being what a lot of people think to be the best Robin. It's a great time. A lot of writers take on during this time. Greg Rucka starts writing Batman around this time, and that goes into one of the best Batman stories ever. But yeah, No Man's Land is a saga. It is even longer than Nightfall. I will say, I didn't say this earlier, I will say, if you want to read this in order, the way I am presenting it to you, it can be in order outside of Batman Hush and Batman Universe. I can give a timeline later of what I think is a general timeline, but
so that was a fucking lie.
You don't really need to. At the end of the day, these are stories. Just put in your head that like, oh, this happened before this, or don't even really go into that. Just read it in a vacuum and think this is Nightfall Saga, and then you can go and read something else later. You don't have to read this all in order if you want to, but right now, like, because I'm skipping a lot of stories, especially in the 80s, 70s. There are a lot of Batman comics that happen. To give you a timeline is not the best because there's just so much. You don't have to read all of this. You should. I want you to, and I hope you enjoy them, but it's a lot to ask somebody. So it's more so just pick from this list and enjoy. So after No Man's Land, you get Batman, Bruce Wayne, Murderer Turned Fugitive by Ed Brubaker, Greg Rucka, and Devin Grayson. This is one of my favorite Batman stories ever. It genuinely is. Greg Rucka is one of the best Batman writers ever, along with Ed Brubaker, who's one of my favorite writers ever. It's in the name. Bruce Wayne's framed for murder, and it's a whole saga of Batman trying to figure out who framed him, and the Bat family is included as well. You get a really good general sense of Batman as a father figure in this series as well. and it is also in the wake of No Man's Land, so Gotham looks different. Very, very great storytelling. I adore this run. After that, you get Grant Morrison's Batman run. A lot of people love this run. I love this run. It is one of the most popular Batman runs ever. Another one that's a saga. It spans multiple years. It was almost a 5 to 7 year run that saw a lot of changes. It incorporated a lot of mythological ideologies for Batman, reframed what Batman looks like as a superhero. Grant Morrison Gets Batman is a great comic book. A lot of characters would hope to have a run this great. I am a little biased because it has my favorite comic book ever, which is Batman and Robin by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. Dick Grayson as Batman and Damian Wayne as Robin is the best handling of the dynamic duo since the Golden Age. Then you have Paul Dini's Batman run, which this runs alongside Grant Morrison's Batman run. If you want to read this in order, it would be alongside it. Me personally, I am of the mindset of like, if you're going to read a run, read the run in totality. Read Paul Dini's run separately from Grant Morrison. You don't have to read them alongside each other because that just makes it complicated. But as far as timeline wise, it does run alongside it. It has, again, another one of my favorite Batman comics, which is Hearts of Hush. And again, it's a Dick Grayson Batman story, and he deals with Hush in this as well. Paul Dini is one of the greats when it comes to writing Batman. You know, no surprise there. He wrote a lot of the Batman the Animated Series, so it makes sense to have him be cemented as a Batman writer in the comics was a great idea, and I'm very glad he got that chance. Great comic. It is collected as a whole omnibus as well, so that's something I was very happy about. Now we're going to skip ahead. We're not really skipping ahead a bit. Moving forward, in New 52, you get Batman by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. Another very popular Batman comic run. One of the best. This and Grant Morrison's run are Batman runs I have reread several times. It's a great ride. In my top 10 comics everyone should read video, I did mention the first arc, which is the Court of Owls, which is the Court of Owls, Jesus Christ, can I talk? Which is the Court of Owls saga. I think if you're gonna read a Batman comic, especially your first Batman comic, I think this should be your first one. If you're going to read anyone first, if you just want to start anywhere, just first run, to me this is the one. With it being a reboot, it makes it easier to just hop in and read everything. I love this comic. It's amazing. These next 3 entries are comics that are very recent. I'm talking like the last 3-4 years. One of them literally just ended like this year. You have Batman by James Tynion IV, Jorge Jimenez, and Gilla March. A huge emphasis on hope with this Batman. This is the beginning of a new status quo where Alfred is dead and eventually Batman loses his fortune, and it's still like that right now. Very interesting time for Batman. This run is great. I think it's underrated. I think while it was coming out, it was very popular. A lot of people were reading it, but I think looking back, a lot of people don't really rate it too highly, I feel like. And maybe it's because Ram V's Detective Comics kind of just blew everything else out of the water, but I'll talk about that later. Great Batman comic. I think especially when you're talking about modern runs, like very recent, must read for sure. Next you have Detective Comics by Mariko Tamaki and Dan Mora. I hate that I have to say this, but this is probably the comic where Dan Mora's art is utilized the best. Tamara Bonvillain on colors really pushes Dan Mora's art so much, and it looks gorgeous. Mariko Tamaki's writing is amazing. Even the fill-in artist with Victor Bogdanovich is great. It's a lot more grounded than James Tynion IV's run, but it's just as great. Honestly, just as great. I love this run. It's a dark horse comic for me. It's very underrated. It does lose people a bit with Tower of the Bat, which is understandable. It's not the best like event that happened in Batman comics, but it's really good, and the end of this run is beautiful. It's wrapped up amazingly. Then you have Detective Comics by Ram V, a host of artists. I talked about it in my I talked about it in my top 10 comics that everyone should read. It's one of the best Batman comics to come out this century. Not much else to say. Ram V is proving himself to be one of the best writers right now, and probably ever. His ability to really understand these characters, put them through very interesting journeys, is just cannot be understated. Amazing writer, amazing run. As far as runs, that's about it. There's more Batman runs. I'll talk about that later though. Next, we have self-contained stories. These can be read anytime. A lot of them are kind of described as being, you know, early years Batman stories, or like maybe like around the time Dick Grayson is Robin. But you have Batman Gothic by Grant Morrison and Klaus Janson. You have Batman Ego by Darwin Cook. You have Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious Earth. And you have Batman Cult. All of these stories are really good. They're miniseries. Two of these ran during the Legends of the Dark Knight series that was running back in the day, which was essentially like an anthology book that saw a lot of writers, some up and coming, some legends, just kind of coming back and writing, you know, short stories for Batman in a series that like every 3 issues or so, there was a new writer, a new team, and a new story completely. It wasn't a run in the traditional sense. It was just a title. It was an anthology series. Very good series, very good stories. Arkham Asylum is by Grant Morrison and Dave McKean. Amazing art in that. And very abstract, very abstract. So if you noticed in this, you know, video, I mainly talk about like modern runs, and I want to direct people more towards modern series, just because I feel like dropping you into the 70s or the 60s or the 80s, it's a big ask. I'm gonna be honest. Like, and I would know. I read Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's Spider-Man run. It was a rough time. It was a rough time. I'm not even entirely sure I enjoyed those comics a whole lot. I respect them. I appreciate them for what they are, for what they did. But you know, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, they had a writing style that is very different from the 90s and onwards. And I think when it comes to, with me, I want to recommend people to read comics and to actually read them and enjoy them. And if they want to read more, they can go back and read more. Some of my favorite Batman runs aren't these. Detective Comics by Alan Grant and Norm Brayfogle is one of my favorite Batman comics ever, but there is a barrier there when it comes to the fact that like it's old, it looks old. Some people may not want that, honestly, and that's just being real. Now, I'll still mention it. You know, I'm still going to put the issues down here if you want to read it. Here, this is, you know, you treat this as a sort of like honorable mention area. And then you have Batman by Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, it's a landmark series. It looks phenomenal. Neil Adams is a definitive Batman artist, but again, it's old. Some of those stories are very dated as well. So I don't want somebody to just read this and be like, what the hell is this? You know, I want someone to go back later around the time. You also have Death in the Family. If you know, that's just when Jason Todd dies. I don't want to say it's unnecessary. Every comic is worth reading at least once. But if you understand Jason Todd's like whole ordeal, I don't think like this is a recommendation. It's not some of his best stories. Just genuinely, to me, this is fully my opinion. If you're interested, absolutely read it. It definitely merits a read. Yeah, that's about it. There are popular runs that people don't like. Batman by Tom King. Admittedly, I like it. I like a decent chunk of it. I don't think it's the best run. I think there are a lot of issues with it. But when it's good, god damn it, is it goddamn great. It is amazing. Cold Days, a lot of the early volumes are some of my favorite Batman stories. Tom King's Bane is amazing to me too. I think City of Bane sucks, but you know, the first Bane volume was amazing. And Mikhail Yanin and David Finch on art is ridiculous. Then later you got Lee Weeks on art. The artist during this run is amazing. It looks beautiful. Not the best Batman run. I think it has some great stories, but you know, I can understand why people hate this run, honestly. But that's about it. There are some other runs. Maybe I'll talk about it in another video. Some like hidden gems that I may talk about. Who knows? I'll probably make a follow-up video. But I just wanted to give like a general recommendation video on Batman comics that I genuinely love and think everybody should read. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment of my list. What are some Batman comics you would recommend to people? I feel like I covered a decent chunk of what everybody should be reading, but if I missed anything, let me know in the comments. I'm human. Like, subscribe. I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.